Elizabeth Pearson Garr. Fascinating. Wow, what a great conversation. What a fascinating woman. Where do I begin? She goes to Harvard and then literature and history major, and then decides to go to culinary school. She wants to be she loves to write, and so she wants to be a food critic, and she wants to kind of gain her chops. So she goes to culinary school. She ends up being one of the first shows on the Food Network in New York City. Great story of how she got that there. Emerald was one of the first kind of stars there. I'm not sure if everybody will understand that reference. Bam was his punch. But Diane Sawyer is one of her role models. She has a great story of how she met Diane Sawyer. So she wants to be in front of the camera. She wants to be an anchor. So she ends up in Billings, Montana, and a series of small markets, series of things happen there, which are fascinating. An agent comes up and says reprimands her, and others say it's a fascinating story. She ends up going to working on documentaries and editing. So she goes to Stanford. She gets her master's in film and video. And we talk about that. And it all comes back to she ends up now she's got this great podcast where it's called What It's Like To. And she talks to these great people and she asks them what it's like to win an Oscar, be a major league baseball player, lose 60 pounds, etc. Great conversation with Elizabeth. Really, really enjoyed it. Thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Joey Pinz. People ask me, how did I lose 130 pounds? The quick answer is always discipline. I started my business, wasn't paying attention to my health, was eating too much, drinking too much sweets. My daughter was born. Next thing I know, I'm pre-diabetic, I have hypertension. I knew something had to change. Discipline. I, like many of you, have faced many challenges in your career, in your family, in your life, in your faith. How did you attack them? How did you approach them? How did you solve them, hopefully? It all had to have some degree of discipline. I'm also asked, how did you found and start a tech business that lasted over 25 years? Discipline. I was committed to it, enjoyed technology, didn't enjoy some aspects of it, but knew it was necessary. Discipline. Our podcast mission, how do we use discipline to better ourselves and society? Join me, please, as I talk to interesting people and discuss how they use discipline in their family and their passion and their careers and how it helped them. Our podcast vision, growth through learning from others. Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. It'll be light and serious. Join us, please. Thank you for consideration. Let's have some fun. Elizabeth Pearson Garr, thank you so much for your time today. I really, really appreciate it. What's it like to have a podcast called What's It Like To?
It's fun and exciting. And as you know, a podcast is an adventure. A podcast is a little relentless. It's something that needs to continually be fed. So it's a lot.
The greatest thing about the podcast is that it's low barrier to entry. You can get right in and do it, and it doesn't cost that much. The worst thing about podcasts is that it's low barrier to entry, and you can get right in and
So true.
there's 3 million of us, and I know many of them, 90% don't go beyond 10 episodes or whatever it is.
Right,
but,
right.
It can be relentless, and you got to make the best of it. What a fascinating, oh my goodness, Elizabeth, Harvard culinary school. I mean, all right. So let's start with the story of meeting Diane Sawyer, one of my favorites. A great story.
Oh, yeah,
New York.
that's funny. Yeah, you've done some research. Yeah, so I was living in New York City. I was working at the Food Network. I had worked
Yeah.
my way into I was one of the first employees at the Food Network. That's kind of its own story, but I had wanted to be in news. I kind of wanted to be Diane Sawyer. I wanted to work at the network level. I worked a couple years at the Food Network, and so I was pretty bold. I was bolder than I thought I was, which is a good thing, I think, for all of us to know about ourselves. We can have parts of ourselves that surprise us. So use those parts, surprise yourself, go after, lean into um, those parts of yourselves that are
Mm.
a little shocking at times. And so when I had that little idea, like, I think I'd like to meet Diane Sawyer, give it a shot. Now, these were the days before the internet. These were the
Right.
days before email. So I actually wrote a letter with probably a typewriter, maybe handwritten, I don't remember, and sent it to her office. And to my surprise, a few weeks later, I got a call um, on my answering machine from her
Mm.
assistant
Mm.
saying, "Yeah, Diane Sawyer would like to meet you." And I couldn't believe it, but we set up a meeting and it was before work for me. So it was on my way to work and it was a freezing cold,
Ooh.
icy day in New York City. I think I had a bit of a cold. And so I'm walking down Central Park West on the way to the ABC News headquarters, carrying my nice shoes to get to, to Diane's
Mm.
office,
Mm.
sniffly nose. And I just remember when I got in there, the first thing she said to me was, because of course then I had changed my shoes, and she said, "Oh, can I get you a new bag for your shoes? That one looks like it's got a
Oh.
hole in it." She was immediately so kind and maternal and caring, and I liked her instantly. And she just said, "What can I do for you? How can I help you? What are your goals?" And I we just had this wonderful conversation, and when I asked her, "Why did you respond to my letter?"
Mm.
And she said, "I saw some of myself in you.
Mm.
I was once a young woman with dreams." And she was just very frank. She said, "You need to get out of New York City. If you want to end up at the network, you have to go to small markets and work your way back up. If you want to be on camera. If you want to be a
Mm.
producer, you know, sure, stay here and you can." So she gave me great advice, and she also was just a role model of class and um, just a caring, wonderful person. And so I've always held her in just such high regard.
Have you ever reconnected?
I have not. No,
Mm.
no. Um, but I think I think about her a lot in the way of um, from a few angles. Being a mentor to other people, if someone reaches out to you,
Mm.
um, if you have the time and the energy to say yes, I will try to help you if I can. And then also from the other side, if you would like some advice or some help, don't hesitate to ask.
Mm.
People won't always take you up on it, but you'll never get it if you don't try. I've done that a few times in my career and just in my life. And I have teenage kids now, and I keep telling them, like, you have to ask, you have to try. And a few times
Mm.
they'll say, "Well, I don't think I'll get it." No, I don't think. And I say, "You don't know. You don't know until you try. Put yourself out there. You will, oftentimes you'll get silence. Oftentimes you'll get no. It's better than not even trying."
Yeah, when my sister passed away about 25 years
Mm.
ago, and so we wanted to do a fundraiser, and I wrote letters. Back then we wrote letters like you did
Yeah.
to celebrities, to athletes, to the president at the time. Hundreds. I got a bunch of people, and so many replied. It was just people.
Ah,
People are just wonderful. At the time it was George Herbert Walker Bush, and I
okay.
still have the letter, and he said, "I'm sorry to hear
Wow.
about your sister passing," and just it doesn't hurt to ask what's the worst that could happen.
That's right. That's right. A little bit of effort on your part, writing the letter can yield huge results.
I sure can. Yeah. So you talk about the Food Network. Now this is
Yeah.
before the network was really a network, but again,
Mm.
the story for you to get on, you just have this knack, Elizabeth, of just
Yeah.
being aggressive and pursuing what you want.
It's so funny to hear that word aggressive because I really don't feel like I am or ever
Mm.
really was, but I suppose there is that little part in me that I am. I do have goals and I have ambition. And
Mm.
so you do have to use it at times. Turn that on, turn that little part of yourself on. So yeah, I was actually living in Washington D.C. for a short period of time, and I must have read an article or seen a little something that said this new cable channel was starting called the Television Food Network in New York City. And I thought, wow, that's incredible because I had, as you briefly mentioned, I had gone to cooking school after college to become a food writer. And I'd always wanted to work in television, but I had been told, no, no, no. It's so hard to work in TV. In college, I had wanted to get internships in TV. And people had said, oh, that, it's really hard to break into TV. And so I had journalism internships, print journalism, and I love writing. And that seemed good. But I always had this
Mm.
dream of working in TV. And then I thought this could be my opportunity because I do have this food background and writing background. So I found there was a name of an executive starting this network. And so I researched him, an address, and I wrote this letter saying, I'm going to be in New York City next week. Can I meet with you? Here's my resume. I had no plan to be in New York City that week.
Right.
I could make myself
Mhm.
available. And he wrote back and said, sure, I'd love to meet with you because they didn't have, there was no food television. I mean, Reese Schoenfeld, who started the TV Food Network, who had founded CNN, just had this brainchild. He was
Mm.
brilliant to come up with this. And so, but he had to get TV people and food people. There was
Mm.
no one who, I mean, there had been, I guess I should correct myself. There was PBS who had done like Jacques Pepin and Julia Child.
Right.
There were those kind of cooking shows, but there had never been a whole network of,
Mm.
so Reese got people who had done TV news and then basically food writers and cooks and that kind of thing. So he was melding us together to try to figure. So the people I worked on a show called TV News and Views. So it literally was people who had worked at local, the New York news stations and didn't know anything about food and
Mm.
food people who didn't know what a rundown was or what it meant to do camera angles or anything. So it was really hilarious and fun to all just kind of create this stuff from the fly.
Is that where Emerald got his start?
Oh yeah, that's where Emerald got his start.
That's what I thought.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Bam.
Bam. That was his signature. And actually Emerald was first, if I recall correctly, I think he was first hired to do a show called How to Boil Water
Hmm.
and was not that successful at that show. And then someone thought, let's just let Emerald be Emerald.
Mm.
We shouldn't box him in. This guy's got a huge personality.
Sure.
And then let him kind of do his thing, got his little signature lines, and he did great. And then, the network really evolved over time. And now it's, of course, a completely different thing than it was
Mm.
in the 90s and in the 2000s. The first two shows were this news show and a show that Robin Leach was hosting. Anyone
Oh,
probably in their over 45 will remember he would do sort of this celebrity rich and famous stuff.
yeah, Richard Famous.
Yeah, so he hosted kind of a celebrity angle show. So those were the first two shows, and then eventually they realized that people wanted to come to a food network to learn how to cook, not to learn about food news and like celebrity food. So then came more cooking shows, and you can see what's happened, since. But we had one of our hosts was Donna Hanover Giuliani, and that was really fun because her husband became mayor
Mm.
a few months after we launched the show. So we got to have Mayor Rudy Giuliani over, and that was kind of exciting when all the secret, I don't
Sure.
know if it was called the secret, I guess it was NYPD would
Mm.
come in, but then that was kind of tragic because then their marriage got very rocky because of stuff that
Right.
was happening. And so, anyway, Donna was a wonderful woman. And it was a very exciting and eventful tenure over at the Food Network.
Hmm. Well, I mean, your degree at Harvard had nothing to do with food, and then you went to culinary school. I mean, or did it?
It did not. I was a
Yeah.
history and
Yeah,
literature
history and
major.
literature, yeah.
Yeah.
So what attracted you to food? Why did you go to culinary school afterwards?
I just, I was interested in cooking. I think I just loved writing. I think
Mm,
a through line for me has always just been
interesting.
curiosity and writing. And since I was a little girl, I've loved to write. I remember, I think I was in third or fourth grade, and I asked my parents if I could go to a summer school on creative writing. And I've always loved that. And so I did some journalism internships. And when I was coming out of college, I thought I would really love to be a writer of some sort.
Hmm.
And um, people said, well, you need to think about what type of, I'd love to work in journalism. I thought I don't really want to do hard news. And then I thought, I've always loved to cook. Maybe I'll be a food writer. And people said, well, you can't just say you're going to be a food writer. You need some sort of credential behind that. You should go to
Ah,
cooking school. So that's why I went to cooking school, knowing that I didn't want to,
interesting.
work on a cruise ship or really in a restaurant or anything like that. It was really more just to get that expertise behind me, that when I was writing, I knew what I was talking about. But I, yeah, I've never, so I still, to this day, I love to cook and
Okay.
that kind of thing. But I knew that I never wanted to be a full on food
Hmm.
person. Like it's hard work. Like,
Yes.
I mean,
Stressful.
hauling those pots around, and
Yeah.
it's a lot for me. I'm more kind of on I like the words and the communication. That's more my
Mm.
side of things.
I love to cook now. I just, I think I've grown better at it. But yeah, the idea, people say, why don't you, have a business? I don't want, I want to cook for fun and I want to cook for
Oh,
friends. I don't want to be in a restaurant and get tickets and get all
oh,
that stress, or be in a catering business. That wouldn't be fun at
that's a whole
all.
different thing.
It really is.
I have done some catering in my time, and that's the closest. I've never worked in a restaurant,
Mm,
but even that, it is when your avocation becomes your vocation, it really
right.
changes it.
Yeah, it changes.
And I mean, I've done some big catering parties, and it is stressful. It's a whole different thing. I really admire those people who can um, cook at that level. So,
Mm,
yeah.
yeah, it's not worth it for me. Anyway, so Diane Sawyer tells you to go to a small market, but you
Yeah.
decide to go to Los Angeles instead, I believe, to for some reasons. But then you end up in Billings, Montana.
Yeah, I do. I I went to LA initially, and then eventually took her advice, and I went to the NBC affiliate in Billings called KULR. So they called it Color 8. That was the acronym, Color 8. And that was, I still feel like I've got a book in me or a mini series or something. I
Mm,
mean, Color 8 was the most colorful place that I've ever been.
really?
Oh, yeah. It was full of just the most interesting characters of small town local news. And some of it was, a large part was just me, because I was such a fish out of water. I had
Mm,
never lived anywhere but on the coasts. And here I was in the middle of the country, and I was working weekends. I was the weekend anchor, and 3 days a week, a weekday reporter. So I kind of had no life, because
mm,
I anything that was really happening there was kind of happening on the weekends, and I was working. So I didn't have any social life.
mm,
I only knew people from work, and it was a really odd existence. And also, to be working in local news, kind of have a skewed perspective on the world. I'm covering like this awful story of a kid getting murdered, or accidents on the
mm,
highway, and
mm,
and we had no budget at all. And so I kept trying to do what I thought was interesting stories, like that people should hear, like about education in Montana, or things that I thought were actually interesting, rather than just sort of the if it bleeds, it leads type of thing.
mm,
And my bosses would say, "Oh, that's really wonderful, Elizabeth, but we actually need to get stories on the air." I think I just kept thinking of like 60 Minutes types of story. Like, I wanted to work at a
mm,
network, and I'm thinking, but
mm.
I don't have, you basically produce and report your own stories at the local news level. And we didn't have to shoot them. We did have cameramen, but everything else you do. And when you're reporting and when you're anchoring the news, you're producing it too. It's very, very tight budgets. And so we definitely got to do some really fun stories too. And I had some really fun colleagues, but some real characters too. So I did actually an episode of my podcast with one of my former colleagues, and we
Ah,
reminisced and laughed a lot because we remember different stories, and then just funny things too. Like you're kind of this mini local celebrity when you're on local news. So like we
ah.
just go out to eat, a few of us, because we were kind of each other's friends, and people would come up and say like, "You're in my living room every night," or "I can't believe you're really friends in real life." And we're like, "Well, we're just kind of each other's friends. Who We're all we've got." One time I was sick. I was really sick, and I just had come from the doctor, and I was, at the pharmacy or something, paying for my prescription, and I said something, and this woman said, "Oh my gosh, are you Elizabeth Pearson? I recognized your voice from the news." And I was like, "Oh, I feel like deathly ill if you recognize my
Aw.
voice." So some weird, weird things.
And then they hire some people and they make you read in front of some agency, and then they make you put on a bunch of makeup, and all this kind of BS starts hitting you in the face, Elizabeth.
Yeah, Joe, you've done your background homework. Yeah, I had some hard lessons of what the news business can be. I had my Diane Sawyer goals, and then I had the reality hitting me in the face of what it takes to get there, which is a lot of it is just based on your appearance, not
Mm,
really the substance of what you are creating. I had some people, I'd send my tape out to bigger markets, and sometimes the response I would get was, "We already have," if they even responded. Sometimes I got, "We already have one of you." And I would think, my parents always said I was unique. I was the
yeah.
only one of me. Which, what they were saying is, we have a Caucasian woman who sort of looks like you in her late 20s. And I
Huh.
thought, did you even see what I can do?
Wow.
And then the story you're referring to was really kind of the final straw for me, which was the station hired, I don't know, some consultant or something. And she came and she asked us all the anchors to read on the set. And so I did it. And she pulled me aside and said, "Elizabeth, I'm so sorry to report to you, but this is a tough industry, and it kind of comes down to some people have it and others
Mm,
don't have it. And I'm afraid to say you don't have it." And I thought, well, that kind of stinks. Like, you're one person,
yeah.
but it doesn't feel great to be told you don't have it. Like, I've been
Mm,
working really, really hard, and I'm in this place that I don't feel like that great. I don't have
mm.
anything here except my work, but I'm really trying. And okay. And then the next day I showed up, and she called me aside and she said, "Oh, come here, come here, come here. I have some things." And she pulled out this bag of makeup, because we always had to do our own hair and makeup. There was no
Amazing.
makeup room. Again, not network TV. She put all this her own makeup on me and did my hair her special way. She said, "Go read again." Put me on the set. And I did it, walked off, and she had this huge smile on her face, and she said, "Elizabeth, now you've got it."
Hmm.
And my heart just sank, and I thought, I'm sure I did not do anything different on that set. So
Mm,
the it is the hair and makeup. And so that's what it's come down to. And I guess some people might have been heartened rather than heartsick, but
mm,
I more felt like, really? Is that all that it's about? Like, I guess I want more substance here. And I know that sounds naive. I mean, clearly it's an image business. I mean, that's what you're seeing first. I guess I wanted it to be a little bit more of an intersection of both. And it just felt
mm.
like it was coming way too much too far on the side of only how I looked. And when I started to weigh out what the prospects seemed to be, best case scenario, I would maybe make it to like a mid-sized market or bigger market. The likelihood of getting like back to New York or to a network or even back to like San Francisco or to a top market, I didn't want to just be someone sitting there reading the news. I really wanted like to do interesting work.
Mm.
And at that point, my sister had had her first baby. And here I had been in Billings, Montana, and hadn't been on a single date. I was like, my
Right.
life is passing me by. And what am I doing? So I decided I wanted to quit. And my bosses said, you can't quit. You're under contract. And actually, they offered me a bigger job. They offered me the main anchor spot. I had been the weekend anchor and then like the fill-in main anchor. And they said, we want you to be the main anchor, but that would start a new 2-year contract. And I said, I can't do that. And
Hmm.
they said, the only way we'll let you out of your contract is if you need to sign that you're not going to work in TV. And I said, I'm not. I mean, I'm getting out. Like they said, they just didn't want me going to like a competing
Right.
market or something. Usually they only let you out of your contract if you've been signed to a bigger market,
Right.
um, so that was really hard. It was sort of, I was easy and hard. I kind of felt like this is what I need to do, but it was also my dream. And it's still hard for me. I still
Mm.
see people who have these jobs and feel like, I know I could do that job. I just I don't know, fill in the blank. Start early enough, stay in it long enough, persevere, yeah, I don't know what, haven't have enough luck, dedication. I don't know what it was, but that's okay. You can't do everything in life.
That's interesting you say that. You can't do everything in life. So what do? You decide to go to film school.
Yeah.
You leave
Well,
Billings, you go to Stanford, and you go to you study arts, film, and video.
yeah, there was some in between. I did some jobs in between. I did like, I worked behind the scenes, like I did some production for like PBS and
That's
things.
right.
And then I decided I wanted to go to graduate school. So I went to documentary film school at Stanford. Um, and yeah, the irony was at that time, Stanford has changed its program now, but at that time it was uh, a master's in communications, and there were 2 tracks. You could do journalism or documentary film and video. And you had to be very clear on your application which one you were applying for. And it
Mm.
seemed so much from my CV that I would be doing journalism from all of my work experience.
Right.
But as I looked at the course selections, all of the journalism ones looked so boring to me. And
Hmm.
all of the documentary film ones looked so fascinating. I wanted to take all those classes. They were just much more creative. And I felt like the journalism ones, I'm like, oh, I've done all that stuff. And so I would just had to be super, super clear on all my essays, why I wanted to do documentary film. And you had to put in a lot of visuals. And I thought, okay, I'll just put in my news work and that I've done. So I got to do that program it was 2 years, very small program, just 8 students per class. And it was so wonderful. It's the hardest I'd ever worked.
Mm.
So engaging and exhausting and wonderful. I absolutely loved it. And it was kind of just yet another muscle to flex, and in the same vein of telling stories. Like when I look over everything that I've done, it's kind of all about um, finding people's stories, communicating them out in different ways. And it's still sort of what I'm doing today with the podcast. Of course, the
Mm.
podcast doesn't have the visual element. I mean, my podcast is on YouTube, but I'm not, editing it with other pictures and stuff like
Sure.
that. But I think that's just what I find so fascinating. I just find like people fascinating and human stories and trying to find connection. And all of that. I think that that's what I really love, and that's maybe what was so missing in the news a little bit, is when it
Mm.
just all has to be boiled down to something short and simple and just basic. I like to be able to kind of go longer and more in depth, which is also what's wonderful about podcasts, is that you can expand and go deeper. And I think documentary film allows for that also.
It certainly does, and I don't know, there's no greater time. There's so many documentaries now. My goodness, they just keep coming out. I mean, it's so
Yeah.
popular now, and PBS Burns, what's his name?
Ken
First
Burns.
Ken. I mean,
Yeah.
he does the long. Did you ever meet him at PBS?
No, no, I didn't. I mean, he's been like a legend for
Yeah.
so long, and now he's kind of created a whole he has his own, kind of group of people that he just leads. I think he can kind of start a project, and then his people will
Hmm.
take it over, and then he starts another project. He's incredible what he can get done.
He actually created an effect with a standalone
Yep.
picture, right? Where it kind
Yep.
of pans away because he
Yep.
didn't have video for them, and
Uh-huh.
yeah, and then I don't know, doesn't his brother also do documentary films? I thought I saw another film by his
Um,
brother.
maybe. I know his kids are involved
Wow.
also. I think I read that his daughter and her husband or something work for him also. I'm not sure about his brother. I wouldn't doubt it, because
Mm.
he has a real, yeah, it's a whole, company. It's like a whole arm of PBS documentaries at this point, is Ken Burns.
What I see as a problem sometimes now, Elizabeth, is I see these documentaries and they're like 3 episodes. I don't know if that's the magic number or not, but
Mm.
they a lot of them can just be 1.
Mhm.
I don't know if there seems like they're stretching them out a bit or something. It's just like on the streaming platforms.
Yeah. Do you think that's uh, there's a whole discussion often about attention span. And I
Mm.
wonder if they think that, well, it's interesting if it's on streaming platforms, because of course we can stop and start those.
Right.
But I hear a
Mm.
lot of discussion about, the quote unquote younger generation and the attention span, and how long should
Mm.
things really be? How long can people sit for? Um, but I would be curious if some, psychologist or someone to do a study on that, because I think it goes both ways. Because if you say people have short attention spans, and yet people binge watch whole
Mm.
show, they can't wait to
Yeah.
get something dropped, and then they'll watch 8
Binge
episodes
it.
at
Yeah.
once.
Yeah. In the night. Yeah.
So I don't know where that falls. I don't know why
Mm.
they would, if it's 3-hour shows and they put it in 3 episodes. I don't know the thinking behind that. Um, Maybe it has to do with sponsorship, or, money is behind a lot of things
Yeah.
too.
It sure is.
And that's the problem with documentary too, is you just don't generally have as much money as with features.
With everything, yeah, and
Yeah.
of course, Ken Burns has created also the long for I mean, the baseball, civil I mean,
Oh,
these things are
all of them.
hours and hours and hours long,
Oh,
and,
yeah.
so what anybody thinking about making a documentary or a doc, what they call now, what should they look for? What makes a great documentary, Elizabeth?
I think starting with research, I think you
Mm,
need to really know what you're doing. Um, Research, great contacts. I interviewed a guy on my podcast who is an Oscar winning documentary filmmaker. And, he just spends years in pre production.
amazing.
Before you're going to even get the camera out, you need
Mm,
to really know what you're don't have an idea ahead of time what this film is going to be about. You need to be curious and open minded as to see where this film is going to take you.
mm,
And I mean, you have to have an idea. You have to
sure.
generally know what, but then see where the facts and the people are going to lead. And I think that that's part of what is so fascinating, is to as you get to start, it's unfolding before you, and then you kind of create the whole thing, interviewing people.
Mm,
It's such a it's I guess I should qualify this. It depends what kind of documentary you're making. There's a guy named
huh,
Frederick Wiseman, who was famous in like the 50s and 60s for making these kind of fly on the wall documentaries, which one was called Hospital. And he would sort of, it's basically as if you just had a camera sitting in the corner and he's just kind of capturing what's happening
Wow.
in an environment. That's a lot different than, say, a Ken Burns type of, taking a bunch of interviews or archival footage. Or so there's a bunch of different ways to make a documentary, to approach the form. But in general, I think research, if you're not doing a Frederick Wiseman type, you really need to do your research, and then the editing, you need to have a great editor, because
Mm,
once you're going to have a lot of footage and a lot of interviews, and you need to figure out how to put this thing together, because and that I love that part. I love editing. And because it's a ginormous puzzle. You've
sure
got
is.
so many interviews, and the whole thing of there's this phrase called you have to kill your orphans. Like sometimes
Ha.
your favorite part, maybe your favorite quote, your favorite piece of footage is the thing that has to go, because it's just not going to fit. It's not going to move the story forward. And so we did that so much in film school. We would watch each other's, rough cuts over and over. And
Mm,
people would say, well, like that part is just kind of stale. It's just sitting there. And you'd be like, no, but that's the key
mm,
guy. I want him.
mm,
And you'd be
mm.
like, oh, you might love him because you loved that part, that interview, but he's not doing anything for the audience. So, um, yeah, I think the editing is just crucial.
Hmm. Has technology, specifically the cell phone and other technologies, has it helped or hurt documentary creation?
I mean, probably a little of both. My first
Mm,
instinct is that it's hurt, only in the sense, I guess, because I was in film school like 20 years ago, and that was right when, that was right before the iPhone came out, but definitely, digital movie cameras were out and everything. And so we learned on both film, we learned also, actually literally splicing film.
mm,
And then we also learned digital. Um, but it was kind of, and I'm so in these last 2 decades, it's only changed more, that, like you mentioned with podcasting, there's such a low barrier to entry that
right.
everybody thinks they can become a documentary filmmaker
Mm,
now. And then with
mm,
iPhones and, Apple Movie and all this, or iMovie, everybody thinks that they can do it. And so in a way, it's kind of nice, I guess,
mm,
the access, but I think it's such an art. Like, and I'm not saying that I'm not a master, but like the guy that I interviewed, or the really great filmmakers, whether it's, fiction films or documentaries, like these people are true artists, and
mm.
it takes years to really understand how to do this, and to have, people to just kind of say like, "Oh, everyone can just make a documentary because I have an iPhone." Like, well, not really. You can't really truly edit on an iPhone. You
Mm.
really need actual equipment and some skill. But I think it's a little of each. On the other hand, I think it's really cool when I saw when my daughter was 8 years old and creating little backyard movies.
Mm.
To be able to, for a kid or anyone to get to feel like you could make a little movie, like, that's pretty great.
Yeah.
So, I think it's a little of both. Pros and cons.
Yeah. When I talk to authors, Elizabeth, especially fiction authors, the whole creative process just it amazes me. And I say, okay, you have these characters. Do you know what's going to happen with them? And a lot of times they say no. They
Yeah,
just, as I'm writing, I find out, and it just boggles my mind how that I
yeah,
can't, I don't understand
yeah,
that at all. It's not the way I live my life,
yeah.
and and I do watch a couple of these documentaries where they were going in one direction, and then they self-revealed, and then we decided to really take it this way because this was revealed. Does this happen with you when you're creating yours?
It has happened.
It's amazing.
It really is amazing, but I've heard that too with writers, where they'll say they're writing a fictional story, and they'll say,
Yeah.
the characters speak to me
That's
as
right.
I'm writing, like, that is
Yeah.
shocking to me.
It's
But
amazing.
yeah, right, in a documentary, you might think it's going some way, and then somebody will, yeah, they'll reveal something, they'll say something, and the story will kind of take a turn. I mean, I think that's so fascinating, like, as
Mm,
an audience member
mm.
to go on that ride, like, you think you're going one way, and then it's almost like you're in it with the director,
Yeah, you're part of the
Like,
ride.
you're
Yeah.
yeah, like, "Oh, okay, we're shocked, now we're
Changing
taking a
gear.
left turn." Yeah. So I think that that's, pretty fun.
It's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
So then you have kids now, you have teenage
Mhm.
girls, I believe,
Yeah.
and so okay, so now your schedule isn't as flexible. So now it's podcast time. Like we said,
Yeah.
there's 3 million of them. And you tell me, I hear you talk about these courses where they want you to, they want you not just to talk about food, but just to talk about mangoes. I think you say,
Oh,
to
yeah.
try to get niche, 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 niche. And of course, I don't believe that. You don't believe that. I mean, mangoes are delicious, but there's only so much you could say about them.
Yeah.
Uh, so you find a really good idea, what it's like to tell me more about it.
Yeah, I think part of it goes to what I was saying before. I just feel like I'm so curious about so many things that even though I have background in a few things that I could say, okay, this will be my niche. Like I could say food or
Hmm.
type of food, or I could try to be documentary film, or, I worked in TV for a while. It could be that. But I like a lot of things, and I really like asking
Hmm.
people. When I was talking to my husband for so long about, like, what should my podcast be about? And he would say, "You're the one who always is sitting at the end of the movie waiting for the credits." I mean, it's partly
Huh.
because I worked in film, but I
Yeah.
wanna see not just, all of the different roles, but I wanna see where it was filmed and who wrote what music. Like, I like all the details, and I like reading at the end of the book, like, all about the author. Like, I just really like knowing about people and all the background. Like when I was, my mom reminds me when I was a little girl and my dad would be traveling and call on the phone, I would say, you know, what are the curtains like in your hotel room? What's the view like? Are you sitting on the chair or on the bed? And like, I'm just a detail person. I want to
Wow.
know all the stuff. And so my husband said, you should do something like a behind the scenes, like behind the scenes of something. So that's for a while, and then I thought, well, I guess I just kinda want, like, behind the scenes of people's lives.
Hmm.
I just wanna know, like, what it's like to be you, what it's like to do these things, be these people, have these experiences, and so that's kind of, I sort of just backed my way into it, like, what it's like to maybe do these things that I'm not gonna do. Maybe some of them I have done. Like I said, I interviewed a documentary filmmaker. I'm not an Oscar winner, so he's done things I
Wow.
haven't, but I had
Cool.
some, recollection, some connection to that. But other things like I'm just never gonna do. I mean, I interviewed, a guy who climbed Mount Everest. Like, I have
Right.
no interest in doing that. Like, that
No.
is nothing that I'll ever do, but I'm completely fascinated by someone that would do that. And he did it twice because the first time he didn't make it all the way. And
Hmm.
why he would even wanna do it once, but I admire it, and I just so it's like just a genuine curiosity about kinda what makes people tick and how they do these different things. So that's how I got there.
When you're talking to somebody on the podcast, how and what do you want the listener to take away from it, or the watcher? Like, what do you have them in mind? What's your kind of philosophy there?
It's interesting. I feel like it's changed over time. I think initially I thought, well, maybe they'll connect to something like I do, like they're just a curious person. And what I realized a little bit into it was there's a thread here that's going on among these interviewees that I had not intended, which was, okay, they're inspirational because they have followed these paths, but what's beyond that inspiration?
Mm.
It's that these people did not take no for an answer.
Hmm.
These people, the reason they are doing these really interesting things is that they kept going because nothing is easy. Not nothing. I mean, I don't care what job you're in, what pursuit you've followed. Everything has a time when there's a roadblock, when there's a time you just would rather stay in bed for that day or that week. And the reason these people got to where they are is that they said, you know what? I am going to keep going. I am going
Mm,
to get up,
mm,
go back, keep working out so I can go, you know, back to Mount Everest or whatever. I'm
mm,
going to keep writing that book or whatever. And I'm not going to let the person say, "No, you can't do that." And then I realized that resonates with me. The reason I'm so
mm.
interested in this is because that's been my story too. People saying, "Oh, you can't be on TV. That's so hard. You know, you can't do that kind of stuff." Like I need to keep hearing this message because this has been my story. And I think it's a universal story is that we need to keep hearing, like, don't take no for an answer. Keep going. And so that's what I think is like inspiring is kind of a cliche word that we hear a
Mm.
lot and it's kind of all over podcasting, but I realized that I think that that's the core thing that people get out of it is that it's positive in that way, and there's a lot of negativity out in the world today and in, you know, just in the news
Yeah.
and all that, but that these people's stories are like, I got there despite it all."
Hmm. Yeah, I get to talk to some great people too, like yourself, and
Mm.
the inspiration, the impact, and another thing that a trait of a remarkable person, I believe, is that they may have overcome some hardship,
Mm.
some like us all, but
Yeah.
many of them are saying, "Hey, I overcame this. This is how I did it. Maybe I can help you do it too."
Mm.
A lot of us can kind of just get it and you know go right over our hardship and move on with life, but it's the remarkable person that actually wants to share it with others. We
It's a
talked
good
about
point.
yeah, filmmakers, so Quentin Tarantino has a great kind of philosophy where he says that he makes movies for himself and anybody can come and watch. So I kind of adopted that philosophy. Like I never, I'm having a great conversation with you. I couldn't wait to talk. I love it, but I'm never thinking, what would a listener ask you? I'm never
Mm.
thinking this. I'm asking you questions that I would ask you because
Mhm.
I want to have a genuine moment. So I don't know what the right or wrong way is. This is just the way, I do it.
Yeah.
Um Rick Rubin, the producer, the music producer,
Yeah.
says something similar, right? He's like, I never think of the person listening to the music. That comes last. Releasing stuff that I really like. People really don't know what they want until they kind of get it and decide if they like it or not, and that doesn't ring true for everything, but this is a philosophy of two particular gentlemen that I'm noting at the moment.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that because I think sometimes if you're trying to do too much of a, I don't know, collective thing, like what would this person like? What would that
Mm,
person like? What would that
mm,
be? Then it just becomes this
mush.
diluted,
Yeah.
yeah, mush. And then
Yeah.
how do you know what a
Right.
thousand people are going to like? If you have a vision and this is what I like, then at least it's appealing to that. And then at least it has, that taste and that stamp on it. So,
I put my trust in Mr. Tarantino and Mr.
yeah.
Rubin, right? And
Well,
and
the results
sometimes it
speak for them.
works. Yeah, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes there's great and there's okay and there's parts that are great and bad, but and I would hope that a listener or a viewer would do the same for you and I.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's really kind of all you can do.
Mm,
At the end of the day, you can just listen to your heart. I've really wrestled with this, as I guess because it sounds like you've, researched me. I've really, really wrestled with this question of what is your podcast about? What
right.
is this niche? And it's a real thing. Anyone listening who knows about like kind of the podcasting thing, there's a kind of a discussion about this. Some people really believe you need a distinct niche.
Yeah.
And that way you can fully market your podcast to, the auto mechanics because you have an auto mechanic podcast. And other people say, forget that. Just do your podcast of what you want. And so this has really plagued me for a while that I am
Mm,
not nichey enough. And I clearly have stuck with my broad podcast for whatever reason, because cannot nicheify myself. I just can't seem to do it. I am not interested in going super, super narrow. And so I just have to accept that about myself. That's what feels right to me. And so I think at the end of the day, you kind of, in whatever you're doing, you accept your decisions and what feels right to you and move forward with that. If
You
you've done
know,
it thoughtfully.
yeah, do a thought. And, that agent that said you don't have it, you certainly have it and more, Elizabeth, and you have a common string with all your episodes, and that's what's it like too,
Mhm,
so
mhm,
you tie them together. So in the 90s, I'm from the tech industry. I started
mhm,
my business there. I was working way too hard, Elizabeth, nothing that you're, not used to.
mhm.
And I didn't pay attention to myself. I saw one of your episodes where it was that they lost like 60 pounds, I think.
Yeah.
So before you know it, I was up to 340 pounds.
Mm,
And the doctor said to me, if I don't lose the weight, I'm not going to see my daughter graduate. So
mm,
this was shocking. On the way home, I was, hitting the, the steering wheel.
mm,
I did this to myself. I'm the one who opened up, the pie hole.
mm,
I did it to myself. So I spent the next 6, 7 months. I lost 130 pounds, and
mm.
you can't treat it like a finish line. It's a complete change. So people always ask me how I did it, like they want some quick answer. So my one word answer is always, look, discipline is how I got rid
Mhm,
of it, right? I got
mhm.
focus, I got routine, etc. That's how I did it. So I wonder how discipline plays a role in your life, Elizabeth Pearson Garr.
I've been thinking about that because I know that that's, the focus of your podcast. And I was thinking about that word and that concept. And for me anyway, I think it's a combination of just natural, like how I was born and
Mm,
what was modeled for me. And lastly, how I decided to behave myself. Like it's a kind of a like three pronged. I think somewhat it's just my natural inclination. I think I'm just naturally a very disciplined person. I also have one of my parents, my dad, is extremely disciplined.
mm,
Like to the point, discipline I also think is interesting because it can border on rigidity, and it can be so helpful and a useful trait, and then it can actually be harmful. So I think it's something that needs to be kind of watched, maybe. Um, and then I think for someone that maybe isn't naturally born with it or had it modeled, you can definitely work it into your life. It's something any of us can, decide to incorporate into our lives. Um, so I think for me, it's been a combination, and I'm a very disciplined person. Like in fact, my 15-year-old daughter last night said something like, I can't believe you exercise, so many days. Like, how do you do, you're so disciplined. How do you do that? And I said,
huh.
well, it's like my routine. It's for my mental health as much as my physical health. And she's like,
Mm,
how do you get the motivation? And and I was like, I just do it. I feel so much better after I do it. But it was
yeah.
just funny that she brought it up, not
Mm,
even knowing that I was talking to you.
fascinating.
But so it just got me thinking, like, how do certain things become a part of your routine? How do you have the
Mm,
discipline to do certain things? Some things you don't even think about, like I have the discipline to go to bed at a reasonable hour, which my teenagers in the summertime do not, or even,
mm,
and it's because I feel the same thing with exercise. I feel so much better when I do. Like I'm just a very like, I think I'm kind of uh reasonable, quote unquote.
sure.
However, some people would say maybe that's not fun enough. Like other people, like my kids would probably say, it's more fun to just stay up as late as you want and push it, because who knows what the night's going to hold if you stay up till 1 a.m. Something could, so I just feel like it's really it's an interesting concept at times. Like there are times in my life I've said like, "Oh, I don't think I should be as disciplined because I should be more open to what might be out there if I let up on my control.
Control.
So I think that my discipline can be harmful at times to myself. Not harmful, limiting.
Mm.
Yeah.
I have this ongoing thesis, Elizabeth, that discipline is a spectrum.
Mm,
Comprised of things that you just said: control and routine and order and willpower and restraint and there's no wrong answer, by the way, right?
no.
It's amazing. Like I wanted to get a couple of these musicians on a duo, and they replied like, "We're anti-discipline. We're not a fit." And I said, isn't anti-discipline a form of discipline? And you know, and some people have this militant, I don't want rigidity, and I don't want that. But you're learning musical instruments, don't you
I
have to?
know.
That
That's what as soon as you said that, that's why my mouth went open because I thought if they're musicians, they have to have some bit of discipline, right? That it's just goes
it's
with part of it. You have to
like you said, there's no wrong answer, and
yeah.
um I use it to lose a lot, but I am not the king of disciplines. Believe me, there's
Mhm.
lots of areas where I lack, but when I want some things, I get focused on it. And, that kind of, I don't know, come to Jesus moment when the doctor said that to me. And now I have this daughter that, that I'm responsible for, that I've brought into this world. And, it's no longer me, things change, perspective
Sure.
changes. So, I just, discipline is it. And, I just think it's a great common theme uh, amongst many people, and I
Mm.
love to hear their responses. Elizabeth, what motivates you?
I think that's such a good question. I think it changes all the
Yeah.
time. I think that's one of the really interesting things about life and um growing older, just change like going through different phases of life is because that changes. Um, I think right now, I think earlier I really thinking of those times in my career, like in my 20s and things, I was really, the Diane Sawyer phase and all that. I was really, really career motivated. I just thought I want to be this, I want to go there, I want to have that, not have that material things, but I want to achieve this
Mm,
level career wise. Um, and now I'm so much more motivated by um I mean, I guess let me just back up for a minute. I'm animated by my kids, I'm just like that's kind of what everything is driven by stuff with my family. One of my daughters is entering her senior year of high school though. So
mm,
that's things are really changing right now. It's a really odd,
yeah.
thoughtful time for us. So I guess I'm motivated. I do a lot of thinking about next chapters, what does that mean for me and for our whole family? It's going to change a lot next year um, when we only have one kid left at home. So I think I'm motivated a lot by what does that look like for me, and
Mm,
that's one reason I started the podcast a few years ago is I want to have something that is really good for me because I've always been a creative person and I need creative outlets and I want to do more writing because that's always been something that
mm,
makes me feel really good. So I think I'm definitely motivated to create space for things that satisfy my uh, creative needs, which is also the podcast. I mean, the podcast is an interesting combination of creativity and connection, but also like businessy stuff, just to keep it going. So that's challenging for me, all that side of it. I like all the creative stuff.
mm.
The marketing and business stuff is hard for me. Um, so Yeah, it's a really good question. What motivates me? But I'm really motivated to try to bring joy into our household.
Hmm. So, given that motivation, Elizabeth, how do you measure success?
I think about that a lot for my kids because they get stressed about things that I think are not worth getting stressed
Mm,
about,
mm,
like grades and colleges and things that I think are just not worthy measures of success. Um, so I think I measure success by sort of just a feeling of like feeling kind of soothed and comforted and
mm,
like an exhaling feeling, like everything's okay. Like knowing that um, that everyone, uh, I guess success for me and success for my kids, if they could know everything I know about them, I
mm,
feel like I want them to know how uh, wonderful they are and that
mm,
they don't have to prove anything,
hmm.
you know?
Tranquility comes to mind.
Yeah, kind of just a peacefulness, like a lack of striving, that it's okay to just be who you are and where you are.
Mm,
I think if everyone could just sort of take a beat, that would feel like a happy, successful moment
mm,
to not have to be on a treadmill of like running and studying and grades and practice and transcripts and, you know, feels like a really crazy time.
and you have a hard stance on social media, your husband and yourself, so that element's kind of been maybe hopefully kind of removed from the stress.
Yeah, but that is still stressful because there's a lot of pushback.
I see. That's how the kids communicate. Yeah, yeah.
um, just last night, I sent, the Surgeon General came out with a report or a suggestion. He wants to, put a label on all social media that it's harmful for adolescents. And so I sent that to my kids, and they were like, we can't read this because we don't have New York Times subscription. And I'm like, okay, here's the CNN version. And they're like, bruh, why do you expect us to read this whole article? I'm like, just so you know, harmful
So
to
different.
kids.
So different. Yeah, it's just so different now. Yeah. It really is. And I is it good? Is it bad? I don't know. It's just different. It's so hard. It's so difficult. They want to connect. I heard you saying the story about they're going to different high schools, and you wanted them, and they still wanted to connect with them, but you should physically get together. And yeah, it's you just go to restaurants and you see families just looking at their phone. I mean,
Oh my
it's
gosh.
disheartening.
It really is so hard I mean, my daughter talks about like at school to be walking down the hall and have all these kids next to her just looking at their phones and
Yeah,
not talking to each other. And I'm telling her, I'm like, guys, in a few years, you're going to be in college. Well, in 1 year for one of them,
yeah.
and you're going to be in the most like, this is one of the times that you're going to be meeting the most people ever in your life. And if you're in a line at the dining hall or to get your books or anything, and you don't know the people around you, is your instinct going to be to pull out a phone because you're uncomfortable? I hope not. I hope your instinct is going to be to turn around and say, "Hi, I'm so and so. What's your name?" I mean, that could be a super boring person who you never
Mm,
talk to again, or that could be your new best friend for life, or it could
mm,
just be someone to have a conversation with for 2 minutes. Like, you don't know if all you're going to do is stare at your phone.
mm.
But like, these are incredible people. This is like your cohort that you're going to get to be in college with, and like spend this is your college people, like, you'll have for the rest of your life. And if all of you and your peers are just going to be staring at phones, it just breaks my heart. Like, get different habits, and like maybe you can role model to not pull out your phone when you feel uncomfortable. But that's it. They're like, "Oh, you're of a different generation." And I'm like, "I
Yeah,
know, a generation
that's
that
for
knows how to
sure.
talk to people."
Yeah, we certainly do. And I read just this morning, Wall Street Journal, that Los Angeles is banning phones at
Yes.
schools.
The school board is proposing it, and they have to now figure out how to implement it. And I was really, really heartened by that.
Yeah,
Like, it's such a huge school district, I guess, probably after New York, probably the second biggest school
I would
district.
think. I would think.
So maybe that will set a precedent.
A trend. Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope it will. I hope it will. Yeah. Oh, Elizabeth, thank you so much for your time. I was so excited when we set this up. I know it got pushed a couple
Thank
times,
you.
and I'm glad we did it. And
Oh, what a joy.
it was really, really cool. So, anybody listening, how can they get in touch with you?
Oh, thanks. Well, I have a website, whatitslike2.net, and that has all my past episodes on there. And that's probably the best way. Or just you can find my podcast on all the Spotify, Apple, Google, all that stuff. It's on there. It's called What It's Like To.
What it's like to.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's a really great podcast, and we need more like them. Thank you so
Thank
much for your
you.
time, Elizabeth. When I'm in your area next time there, Northern California, perhaps we can all get together and have a cup of tea.
Ah, it'd be awesome. Thank you so much.
You be well. Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations.